Most people remember the first game they ever played. I remember the moment that gaming became part of my life. It didn't start in a toy store. It didn't start on Christmas morning. It started with a knock on my front door and a lesson I'll never forget. So close your eyes and imagine this with me. To understand why that moment mattered, you first have to understand what life was like back then. The early 90s were a much simpler time. The internet wasn't something people had in their homes. So there was no surfing the web, no YouTube, no Facebook, or whatever people are using these days. Ha! Yeah, I'm definitely showing my age. We entertained ourselves by climbing trees, riding bikes, and staying outside until the streetlights came on. There were no cell phones either, and the phones we did have were attached to the wall with what felt like a leash. If you wanted to call your friend, let's say little Joey, you had to hope and pray he was actually home. But chances were he wasn't. He was probably outside climbing trees too. So more often than not, you just didn't get a hold of them. I know it sounds terrifying, and yes, those were dark, dark times. Anyway, it's the early 90s, and I can't tell you the exact year, so cut me a little slack. I was about 5-ish. It seemed like a completely normal evening. I was just a kid doing what kids do, sitting in front of the TV while my parents talked in the kitchen. Now, I'd love to tell you it was raining outside, that the thunder was crashing, and the wind was howling. You know, to really set the mood. But the truth is, it wasn't. It was just another ordinary night. At least, that's what I thought. Then, knock, knock, knock. I immediately stopped what I was doing, which, at that moment, was the very important business of watching TV. And I turned to see who was at the front door. Back then, people didn't text before showing up. They didn't share their location. If someone knocked on your door, they were either family, a neighbor, or someone you weren't expecting. Either way, it was exciting enough for a 5-year-old to investigate. My dad answered the door and started talking to someone I didn't recognize. I could hear it was a woman, but I couldn't make out much of the conversation. After a minute or two, he invited them inside. A woman walked through the door, and walking beside her was a young boy about my age. I watched them for a few seconds, trying to figure out who they were as my mom and dad led them into the kitchen. Then my attention span, which, at 5 years old, was measured in seconds, kicked in. Adults talking. I turned back around, planted myself in front of the TV again, and went right back to what I considered far more important entertainment. I had absolutely no idea that the next few minutes would become one of the most memorable moments of my childhood. A few minutes later, my dad walked back into the living room, carrying something in his hands. I had absolutely no idea what it was. He knelt down in front of the TV and started connecting wires to the back of it. At 5 years old, I stood there watching him like he was performing some kind of magic trick. Whatever he was doing, it had my complete attention. When he finished, he slid the TV back into place, looked over at me, and handed me a controller. I turned it over in my hands, thinking, what is this? I'd never seen anything like it before. Then he switched the TV to a different channel, reached over, and pressed the power button on the little gray box. If you haven't guessed by now, it was a Nintendo. A few seconds later, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles appeared on the screen. I remember just staring. The music started playing, the title flashed across the screen, and I was absolutely hooked before I even knew what I was doing. I loved the Ninja Turtles. I'd watch the cartoon every chance I got. Leonardo was my favorite, and I can't even tell you how many sticks I picked up in the backyard, pretending that they were his katanas. I was overwhelmed with excitement. My dad smiled and told me he'd bought it because he wanted me to have fun. Looking back, that's not the part I remember the most. What happened next is, my dad walked back over to the young boy, sat him down beside me, and looked at me. "He can't see," my dad said. "He's blind. He can't see the game like you can. I want you to tell him everything that's happening while you play." I don't think my dad realized it at the time, but with one sentence, he had given me the biggest job I'd ever had. Just like that, my excitement turned into confusion. Now you've got to remember, I was only about 5 years old. I didn't even know blindness was a thing until that moment. I honestly thought everyone experienced the world exactly the way I did. I remember looking over at him thinking, what do you mean he can't see? How do you explain blue to someone who's never seen blue? How do you explain what Leonardo looks like? How do you explain a burning building or a city skyline? Or 4 Ninja Turtles standing on a rooftop? At 5 years old, I didn't have answers to any of those questions. All I knew was that my dad had asked me to help, and I didn't know if I could do what he asked me to do. But I also didn't know how to tell him no. So, I picked up the controller, took a deep breath, and pressed start. So I did my best. At the same time, I was trying to figure out what all the buttons on the controller did. I was also trying to describe everything I was seeing. The turtles are standing on the rooftop. There's a building on fire down below. I'm Leonardo, and I'm hitting the bad guys with my swords. Oh! Big metal balls are rolling down the stairs, and then they hit me. More than once. Apparently, describing the game and actually playing it at the same time wasn't a skill I'd mastered yet. Before long, the boy and his mother got up to leave. I don't remember exactly what they said as they walked out the door. I don't even know if the little boy remembers that night, because from that moment on, I wasn't just someone who had played their first video game. I was someone who had learned that sharing an experience could be just as meaningful as having it yourself. More than 30 years have passed since that night, and I don't know where life took that little boy. I don't know if he even remembers me, but I remember him. Every time I upload another blind playthrough, this memory comes back. Normally, a blind playthrough means experience a game for the very first time. To me, however, it means helping someone else experience one. And every time I press upload, I think about that little boy sitting beside me. I'll probably never see him again, but I'll never forget him.